Welcome to The Foundry, where leaders are forged daily. Each week we investigate themes of leadership, entrepreneurship, and mindset with some of the greatest minds in real estate. And now, the data scientist of real estate, George Roberts.
Welcome back, investors. In the second half of this amazing episode with Malcolm Turner, we will learn more about his amazing book, Financing the Unbankable Deal, which is due out at the end of May 2023. You will hear more about how you can put yourself in the driver's seat when it comes to closing loans with your lenders. Stay tuned for Malcolm's answers to our famous rapid fire round, the 7. And as always, if you're interested in investing in real estate without having to deal with the tenants, termites, and tantrums, head over to www.horizonmultifamily.com to get started. And now, back to our regularly scheduled programming. Well, now one of the things I'd like to do is help people think like a lender. I think that's one of the ways that you could really bridge the gap. So you have so many investors that run the numbers. They say, this is the perfect deal. Hey, are you going to finance this thing? You know, hey, why not? Why wouldn't the lender finance what could be a perfect deal? There's all this meat on the bone. So how can you help us understand that banker's perspective? What are some of the things that a banker would look at that maybe an ordinary investor wouldn't? Like, we think about things like debt service coverage ratio, loan to value. That's something that I see on both sides of the aisle. That's part of the common conversation. Right. But then you get to something like debt yields. That's something that most investors haven't heard, but every lender knows exactly what that is.
Yes. Yes, we do. But that's where, George, you look at how can I mitigate risk? Because when you talk about thinking like a banker, it's all about risk. And I've had people say to me, well, man, these guys should love to do this deal because of the interest I'm going to be paying them and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, dude, they're more afraid of losing their money than the interest they're going to gain by you making payments. So you first off have to make them comfortable, because fear supplants greed when it comes to banking. So how can you make them comfortable that your plan is sound, the property is good, you've got the right team together to make it happen? All of that, that's why, like, one of the things we talk about in the book is the narrative, where you have to craft a great story and a great narrative about the deal that you're putting together. You can't just throw numbers on a page and say, oh, these guys will just salivate over this thing. You got to tell a story. This is America. Everything has to be sold, right?
Yeah, awesome. And to just get right down to the point, I mean, obviously, you're not benefiting from the upside like the equity, right? You're focused on that downside because also you want to stay in your lane, right? You're great at making loans. You don't want to take over the property, right?
Not. Absolutely not. Absolutely
But if you do, you want to know what it's going to look like, right? So that's your loan yield. You're going to take a look and say, well, if it comes to it, I want to make sure I'm making a lot on each dollar.
Right. We want a nice conservative, you know, investment, which is the paper. And as my mentor in the business told me years ago, I started this company 16 years ago, and my first mentor said, Malcolm, understand, you are in the paper game, not the property game. Mm-hmm. The investors are playing the property game, you're playing the paper game. So with us, it's all about yield, right? It's all about the spread. You know, every multifamily investor should totally understand what the 10-year treasuries are doing and where they're at all times. Because what you're going to pay on your paper is going to have a direct correlation to that 10-year treasury. Every spread, whether it's bridge or Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, is going to fluctuate based on that 10-year treasury. It's foundational.
Yeah, absolutely. And although it may seem odd to us investors that you wouldn't like to take over the property and enjoy the profits, it's not like I have time to be a commercial lender in my spare time, right? And right. Why would that commercial lender want a second job either?
Oh, when someone's late on a payment, I start sweating bullets, man. I'm like, I'm not trying to get a hammer and some nails and some drywall, and deal with some painters and plumbers and go in there and finish that project. That's not my jam.
No. Well, you know what I'd like to do next is I have a series of short questions, and this is really to help you, the investor, forge the ideal relationship with your commercial loan broker, whether you're experienced or new to the game. So these are some things that I think investors are maybe doing wrong and places where maybe you could set them straight. So when is the best time to reach out to your commercial loan broker? I mean, I got to have this thing under contract, right?
I think as soon as you spot the opportunity, you bring it. I have seasoned investors I work with on a regular basis. They come to me with a deal before they have it under contract. And they say, hey, Malcolm, what do you think I can get on this deal? 70% loan to value, 75, 65. Where's the numbers going to come out? What's the cost of the capital? And then I qualify it for them. That's also one of the reasons that we came out with an app so that investors could be sitting there in the driveway of the property while they're waiting on the realtor to show up, and they could calculate, here's the value, here's the income, the tax, assume they have the basic information, and at least know if it qualifies for financing. Now once we get the rent roll and the operating statement, we could do a deep dive as to exactly how much, but at least know if we're even wasting our time taking a look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. I got your app. It's really super easy and free. Just download it. And like you said, you just enter a few things. They're going to tell you whether it's feasible. Is it likely? Is there any likelihood at all here that we can get a loan on this? And you did mention a little bit about telling the story behind the numbers. And I'd like to give you another opportunity because I think that's another mistake that people are waiting, not just waiting too late to reach out, but just reaching out and giving you just the numbers, right? I mean, what does that really tell you just to see all the numbers on the page? It's really the story.
We need the story. Why this property? Why you? Why are you the one for us to entrust? Because from a lender's perspective, we have more in the deal than the investor does, right? So if I'm financing 75%, so on a $10 million deal, I'm giving the $7.5 million. Man, you really got to tell me why you? Why this particular deal? What's special about it? After we give you the money, what's your plan to make it more profitable? What's your exit strategy? If someone is, for example, it's a bridge loan, not a long-term loan. Okay, so if you're in this loan for anywhere from 12 to 36 months, well, what's the plan in 24 months? How are you going to take us out? Now, if you say, this is an awesome deal, and I have no plan or strategy in place on how I'm going to get you out of the deal in 12 months, that loan's not getting approved.
Exactly. What are the pitfalls? How are you going to overcome them? Why are you the one to overcome them? All these things are very important. Now, what about
besides the numbers?
Process? Yep.
Right. Besides the number, what's the story of the deal?
Yeah. So what are some of the pitfalls in that loan process that investors should be aware of so that they don't get any unpleasant surprises at the end?
Well, one obviously is going to be valuation, right? When you said this thing was worth $5 million, how'd you come up with that number? That's a very common first world question we're going to ask. And I have sometimes sellers will give us a number and we'll be like, man, this value is not that. It's not even close. Where'd they get that number from? If someone says, yeah, I'm selling this building for $2 million, well, that's what you want. But based on the NOI and the rent roll and market rates and the cap rate for comparable properties, this thing's sitting here at 3.1 tops. And so as an investor, you want to know when you're putting your application in, here's all the reasons why that value is justified. That way you don't get yourself in a situation where you've paid $5,000, $3,500, $10,000 bucks, depending on the size of the property for an appraisal, and the value comes nowhere near what you thought it was going to. And now you're like, man, I spent all this money and, but I'm sure most of your investors don't run into that, right? They're not
Sure.
making that.
Yeah,
They're
we
not
got great
making that
listeners
mistake.
here. Best audience in the world. So, uh,
Absolutely.
right. And that's one of the ways you can tell if somebody's sophisticated or not. I mean, you're letting them say, hey, how much money should I loan you? You know how much you're going to loan on that deal. But if there's a big gulf, that tells you, hey, maybe this person isn't really living in the same universe.
Yes. And you just reminded me of something very key. Matt, we covered this in the book. You might even remember this part about debt service coverage.
Mhm.
Debt service coverage ratio, which is the spread between your NOI and your mortgage payment, that is more important than LTV. You can ask for, again, $4 million to buy this property, but Mr. Seller, the cash flow on the NOI only supports his debt
Right.
at $2.8 million. So we got a problem. You need to drop that price a little bit, because if the NOI doesn't support the debt, we're going to back out and say, what will the NOI support with a 1.2, 1.25, let's say we're talking about multifamily debt service ratio. So if the most that it will pay for with a comfortable spread is a $1.5 million mortgage, and you want to buy it for $4 million, well, Mr. Buyer, you have to come up with that difference. Because we can't finance, I remember I had this argument with someone. It wasn't long because it was a really short conversation. But the guy was like, yeah, it's $4 million. This is in property in New Jersey. And I should be able to get 3 million. And I'm like, yeah, but the debt service with the cash flow is 2.2. But you guys are doing 70% loan to value. But it won't cash. How are you going to make the payments? And his brain was stuck thinking I should be able to get, 70% loan to value. And I'm like, yeah, but your cash flow ain't going to support that. That's 2.8. This cash flow is showing it's going to do 2.1, 2.2 tops.
Yeah, and I think that's something that a lot of investors are really wrestling with. I mean, you've got these very compressed cap rates. Sure, they're expanding a little bit, but historically speaking, these cap rates are supporting an extraordinarily high valuation. And people are finding, hey, I got a 60% LTV. Why? Well, because you're constrained by that debt service coverage ratio. Yeah, definitely reason why financial modeling, very, very important. And I love that because actually that was the next question I wanted to ask you. I know you're a numbers guy, obviously you're a numbers guy, and understanding the metrics is key. So do you have a favorite underwriting or return metric that you want to share?
Wow, that's a great question. I would say, going back to debt service again, if you underwrite every deal with a 1.25, again, we're on a multifamily podcast, so I'm skewing towards multifamily now. If it's other type of business,
Sure, we talk about all kinds of commercial real estate and even other alternative assets too. So hit us, whatever you want.
So
You
it
want to
might
give
be
us some
like
other,
it might be
yeah,
1.3
like
or
hospitality, etc.
1.35 for other types of property. But you want to use the most conservative debt service, especially in an environment of rising interest rates. So if I'm looking at 6.25% with a 1.25% rate, where does that cash flow come out at? And then say, okay, what can I finance? I just looked at a multifamily. It was a 44 unit. They were trying to, I think the seller was thinking about listing it for $5 million. And we're doing a Freddie Mac small balance. And we're saying, okay, the most that this thing is going to cover debt service wise is like 2.7. So are you sure about that $5 million valuation?
Right.
Are you positive?
Yeah. Yeah, huge to have your lender look things over. That's one of the advantages to working with a lender as opposed to doing seller financing. Now, here's one of the things you cover in the book. One is a non-recourse loan actually a recourse loan. There's things that people need to know. You think you're signing a non-recourse loan. A lot of things you got to mind. If you don't do these things, or if you do these things, boom.
Right, right. Non-recourse is king. I mean, it's not even a question. You sometimes you'll have to do full recourse because of the situation. You know, sometimes it's too early in the game and someone's investing life to go to non-recourse, but everyone wants to live there. Non-recourse basically means I'm signing on the loan in the name of my LLC, and I am not personally liable or responsible. And in case of default, they can only take the property. And if the property is not enough, in other words, if I owe, let's say $3 million, and at auction, they get 2.5, well, the bank is eating that $500,000. They're not coming after you. Full recourse means whatever they don't get on the market, they're then coming after you for every dollar above that number. When you do non-recourse, that's how you scale. Because I can do property after property after property transaction. You know, people who buy commercial real estate on a monthly basis are doing all non-recourse financing. They're not tying up their personal assets, because you will get to a point where it says, okay, I personally guaranteed this note and this note and this note, and the bank's like, okay, we're done.
Right, right. Well, I was hoping you'd tell us some of the pitfalls, because I know some of the common ones are like, if you don't have insurance on the property, you're not paying your taxes. If you are wasting, right? Like you don't repair the property.
You talking
These
about
are common.
the carve-outs that will blow up a
Yes.
non-recourse deal?
Yeah.
Right. Every non-recourse deal has what they call bad boy carve-outs. You know, it's what it's been called for years. It's not a gender thing. And it's basically saying you did things in bad faith, where maybe you tried to change the use. And you said, like we talked about with the hotel to multifamily.
Mhm.
And then you decided, you know what, I'm going to go back to a hotel. And we're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. That's not what the intended use that you borrowed the money for. That's not the premise, right? It could be example where someone's using their multifamily or any other investment property like an ATM machine, and they're just taking money out willy-nilly. They're not paying the taxes. They're not keeping the insurance up. And if we get a notice that you messed with the insurance or it expired, we're like, wait a minute, what's going on? Did you just happen to miss something? Did you change banks? Was there something going on? Or you just canceled that policy? We can't have a property without insurance. Okay, we're going to call that note. You know, your non-recourse option just went poof. Now it becomes full recourse.
Yeah, that's huge. You got to consider that when you're the one signing on the notes. A lot of things. You got to read that. Look at all those. They're called springing guarantees if you want to get technical, and you got to understand every one. Make sure your lawyer understands every one, explains it to you in plain English so that you know.
Yeah, and generally, as long as the property's managed, you know, properly and professionally, it's not really not an issue. Those provisions, like if you had, you know, low occupancy because of the market, that's not the same as someone who just said, you know, I'm going to buy this condo in Boca and I'm going to pull out $500,000 out of my reserve account. That's a different scenario.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's called bad boy carve-outs for a reason.
Exactly, because this is where you've done essentially something wrong, and you're not honoring the commitment.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
All right, that's awesome. And so we talked a lot about lending, and hopefully found a lot of ways that you can keep that relationship healthy. Make sure you don't get hit by any unexpected surprises. I just wonder, is there anything you want to say to sound off? Is there anybody or anything you're seeing out there that borrowers are doing, investors are doing that's just really silly? Like, don't do this. Don't mess up the relationship.
No, I can't say I see people doing silly stuff. I'll say this though. I was on a lender call with some other lenders probably about a month ago, and what we see is a big opportunity that your viewers should definitely be aware of, or your listeners should be aware of, is there's a lot of property that's going to come into the marketplace because those balloon payments we talked about earlier,
Oh yeah,
they're maturing into a substantially higher interest rate environment.
Right.
So some of those deals they're going to say, okay, you know what, I got to sell. I'm not refining. So
yeah, that's the other side of the bridge loan, right? Offers you great opportunity to get into things. And then those people who can't take that bridge and reach the permanent financing, they may be the great deals of tomorrow.
right, because sometimes it pays to take the loss if you're the seller, because the losses are temporary. And if I let this deal go into foreclosure,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
going to impact my ability to get access to capital in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So temporarily, yeah, I need to dump this property and sell it right now, and I'll get back in the game on the next deal later on. But if I just let it go into foreclosure, you know, I'm going to harm myself in a very huge way long term. So we definitely think there's going to be some opportunities that are going to come into place in the marketplace where folks are going to say, I'll sell. And, you know, and then if they're dealing with Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae, you know, depending on the circumstances, you can say, I'm going to take on some assumable debt, because all those loans through Freddie and Fannie are assumable. Now, bridge financing is not, but those are.
Mhm.
So there's going to be opportunities where you could come in and say, hey, I can put some deals together and do some creative financing to make what seemingly looks like someone else's problem becomes my opportunity.
Exactly. Problem solvers. That's what we do out here.
That's what we
So-
do. There's a great quote in my book by Albert Einstein that says the thinking that caused us to have these problems is not the same level that's going to get us out. And, you know, as entrepreneurs, you know, if we can sit back and think more creatively, you know, maybe bring on some different team members that we hadn't worked with before, because you have someone who's like, no, that can't happen. That can't happen. Well, there's got to be a way, because other people are doing it. The beauty of unbankable deals to me as an investor is there's way more unbankable deals in the marketplace than there are bankable deals in the marketplace.
Right. And
And
these are
we-
deals that are making a lot of money, potentially.
They're making a lot of money, and people are driving by, and we got a ton of case studies in our book to show it.
Mhm.
People are driving by saying, oh, I guess that can't happen. I guess that won't work. And then 6 months later, a year later, you'll see someone else got that deal.
Right.
It made it happen, did that conversion, did the reposition, did the value add. And it's like, wow, I would never thought to do that. Because sometimes you got to have either yourself or partners who can think out of the box.
Absolutely. Now, I want to ask you about mentorship. I know you really built up the community in Detroit,
Mhm.
and that's something I know you've spent a lot of time just trying to get more players in the game, educate people. So what really inspires you to build that community?
Service. I mean, I've got a servant's heart. You know, I've been married 26 years, 3 kids, a dog, right? And I've been a deacon for 15 years.
Yeah.
You know, and that's all about service. And one of the things that I learned a long time ago, I think it was Martin Luther King said it, you know, you can't lead the people if you don't love the people.
Mm.
Right. And I would say my biggest advantage in business is my stoicism. You know, I'm a stoic kind of guy. And when things go wrong, when people flip out, I don't. You know, I mean, sometimes I'll just sit there and be like, okay, are we done? Can you get off the floor now? Can we now solve the problem? You know, because that getting emotional, getting ticked off and calling lawyers doesn't get deals done.
Right.
And so, and that served me well with my personal life. It served me well in serving my community in the church, and then also in the investor community. You know, I always tell people working with me on a deal that sometimes the boogeyman is going to jump out. We don't know when. It could be at the beginning of the deal, the middle of the deal, or right before we close. And when the boogeyman jumps out, it's going to scare the hell out of us. And it's going to make us believe this deal's not going to close. right? So all we do is we come in the room, we turn the lights on, we look under the bed. Hey, the boogeyman's not real, right? There was some toy that was going off that was voice activated. We turn it off, we go back to sleep, and we have a good night, right? So it's all about what do I got to do to solve the problem and not get overly, emotional about it, and realize when it happens, and invariably sometimes it does, it's the boogeyman that's doing it. I had a deal where that happened. We got literally to the 9th hour and something occurred where it's like, oh my God, this deal's gonna blow up. And it's like, no, we'll figure it out. We'll do this. As you know, George, sometimes you have like seller concessions. You may have a municipality that's saying, oh, we're gonna want these tax liens taken care of, and
Right.
this has to be done. It's like, okay, well, how do we solve the problem? Yes, should we have known about it earlier? Sometimes things don't actually show up. And it wasn't where it wasn't disclosed. It
Right.
wasn't even on a radar screen. And they just issued the notice yesterday. Oh, okay, it's not a bad faith. No, it's not a bad faith issue. They just told us yesterday, now we have to go solve it. Oh, okay. And then we just work it out. So for me, sometimes that means I have to flip a deal where the lender that I was working with is just not going to do it given the new circumstances, but that's okay. A good loan broker like myself is going to have a backup plan. So I have another lender that'll easily pick that ball up and carry it over, because the thing that other lender was all in a tiff about, these guys don't care about at all. And the deal still gets done. Now, does that delay things a little bit? Yeah, it does. But at the end of the day, it's about me getting my investment target. And if I got a deal where I'm going to make 40% ROI, no is not an option.
Right. Well, I love this. And Malcolm, you know what? I have so many questions I'd like to ask you about life and entrepreneurship, but I think we got to wrap it up. And I want to head into the 7. So this is our rapid fire round.
Okay.
Okay. Are you ready?
Yep.
All right. So if you could be known for only one thing, what would that be?
Personally, integrity. And professionally, I say professional, I mean, as far as my business is concerned, certainty of execution. They know we're going to close.
What is the greatest lesson in leadership that you've learned as an entrepreneur?
The platinum rule, which is, the golden rule is to treat people like you want to be treated, but the platinum rule is to treat people like they want to be treated. And to implement that, you have to listen. And it's better to be a great listener than to be a great speaker.
What is the personal characteristic that has been most pivotal to your success?
Being stoic, like I mentioned before, circumstances happen beyond our control. And how do I solve the problem and move on and achieve success? That's probably the biggest thing.
All right, love it. So that's the perfect lead in or metaphor here. I got my random questions here. Just tell me when to stop cutting the deck.
Okay.
We're going to have some randomness here.
Go.
All right. Oh, this is crazy. I don't know. What is your favorite reality show? Do you even have one? Do you have time for TV, Malcolm?
I do not watch reality TV.
Okay, good.
I rarely watch. I'm a Star Wars fan, so anybody who watches Star Wars, I've seen them all. This is the way. If you know what I mean, you'll get it. If you don't, it's okay.
All right. Can you name a book that's helped to forge you as a leader and as an entrepreneur, and why?
A couple. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Always, it's Bible. The 10X Rule by Grant Cardone has been very helpful. And then recently, this one a little bit out the box. Discipline Equals Freedom by 𝐤𝐸 𝐷𝐸. Great book. Quick read. It's like knowledge bomb after knowledge bomb. It's a great book. I can't recommend it enough.
All right. Can you tell us what was the biggest challenge you overcame in the last year and what it taught you?
In the last year. Oh man, that's a toughie. I would say in the last year, man, that's a tough. The last year has been great for us. It was last year was my best year ever. I mean, the only challenge I've had in the last 12 months was I got COVID, and COVID was kicking my behind
Yeah.
big time. But thank goodness for Paxlovid and treatments and doctors and all that good stuff. But business wise, no, it's been fantastic.
Awesome. Glad to hear it. So can you give us a
Now,
quote to
globally, I'll say this: not moving fast enough.
okay.
So if in other normal moments, I would say all my quote unquote regrets are not moving fast. Like even writing my book, you know, I started writing my book in August. That's when I got with my publisher, and I wish I had finished it faster. You know,
Right.
expanding into other markets like we've been doing. You know, we became a lender in 2019. So I started the company in 2007. You know, I wish we had done that faster. Just move as an entrepreneur, move faster,
I love it.
fail
Yeah. So
faster.
refinancing the unbankable deal, and you hear another great anecdote. I know you got one about that standalone drugstore. So we'll just leave that for the readers. Got to read the book if you want to find it. Okay. Can you give us a quote to send us out with a quote that will help to forge our listeners as leaders and entrepreneurs?
You know, the book, the quote I got in the book from John F. Kennedy about we do the thing because it is not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And the second part of that quote, which is lesser known, which is doing the hard thing, overcoming that challenge makes us stronger. We become more, you know, and it's a challenge that we refuse to back away from, you know. And if we as entrepreneurs take success and say, you know what, success, I'm not willing to accept failure. And success is the only option. Once you have that mindset, then the solutions to the problems that you need to solve will come.
All right, that's outstanding. And this show is all about connecting people. So I want to ask you, why should people hit you up for their next loan as opposed to any of those look-alike, boring, no-name lenders? Tell us what is the one thing that you're going to do that is head and shoulders above the rest?
Well, one, I'm going to be a straight shooter with them. You know, two, I'm going to share with them, this is my secret sauce. I share best practices. So if I see something that they be doing that's better, I'm going to recommend that. And what other investors are doing in the marketplace to be more profitable. And so if there's something I think that they can do to enhance their returns, I'm going to bring that to the table, as well as close. Because the one thing is certainty of execution with us. I just had this conversation with someone yesterday. I'm talking with the seller. So the buyer is going through some things and the seller knows me. And so the seller called me and said, hey, Malcolm, how are we doing? Right? And I'm like, we're doing good. And I told him straight up what the buyer had already told him. So we all knew each other. So it was okay for me to talk to the seller. I just want to clear that up. But I let him know, you know, we're going to close. You guys know how I am. I'm like a dog with a bone. And they're like, you know what? You are a dog with a bone when it comes to the deals. You're right. We feel okay, you know. But sometimes when it's like delay after delay after delay, and I'm not unwilling to talk to an attorney, to talk to a title company, to talk to the seller if need be. I had a deal went south and attorneys were getting involved and screwing it up. And I talked to my buyer and I said, you know, can I call the seller and clear this up? Because these guys are getting to a food fight. And she was like, yeah, absolutely, you can. I was like, okay. And I called the seller and we got it worked out, you know, because to me, it's all about closing the deal, you know, and I'm willing to do whatever I got to do to make it happen.
All right, I love it. So then how can people reach out to you? And I know you have some goodies online. If you want to mention those now, you can do that. Otherwise, we're just going to put that into the show notes.
Yeah, they can find me at castlecommercialcapital.com. Our mobile lending app, which we talked about earlier, you can find at the Apple Store, Apple App Store, as well as Google Play. Just look up Castle Commercial Capital. You can also find us on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel under Castle Commercial Capital. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. I mean, if you can't find me, man, you're not looking. And the book is going to be coming out here in a couple of weeks on Amazon. And so that will be found also at financingtheunbankabledeal.com. That website won't be up for probably another week or two.
Great. And this I can probably make this coincide with that. So that'd be towards the end of May. We're looking for a launch. Yeah, like about 3 to 4 weeks in. Love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing.
I forgot my number. 800-598-5530, extension 1.
All right. Well, I want to thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and experience with our audience, Malcolm. You're the real deal. You've mentored so many people on the scene. Just want to thank you for taking the time to come and talk to our audience today.
Hey, it was great being on your show, George.
All right. Thank you.
Take care now.
All right.